My heels echoed against the cool marble floor as I crossed the grand hallway, sunlight pouring in through the tall, arched windows. The scent of fresh lavender drifted from the garden outside, mixing with the faint aroma of my morning coffee. From where I stood, the castle looked like something out of a storybook: polished oak doors, sweeping staircases, gilded frames with portraits I'd collected from my travels. It still felt surreal that this was mine. I smoothed the cuff of my cream silk blouse and reached for the gold pen on my desk, ready to sign the last set of documents for a charity gala I was hosting. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. Amanda, my old high school classmate. The one who used to joke about my creaky haunted house loud enough for everyone to hear. Hey, I'm in town. Some of the old gang is getting together. We should catch up. Maybe I could swing by your place? I've always wondered where you ended up living. I read it twice, a slow smile curling on my lips. I could almost hear her voice, dripping with curiosity and the faintest trace of condescension. A rush of memories pressed against me: chipped paint, sagging roof, the sound of rain leaking through my bedroom ceiling, and their laughter. But that was a lifetime ago. I glanced around the room, sunlight catching the glint of the crystal chandelier, the way the marble floor reflected every detail like a mirror. Oh, Amanda, I whispered to myself, you have no idea. I was 16 the first time someone openly laughed at my house. It was late October in Maplewood, Ohio. The air smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke, and my breath puffed in little clouds as I walked home from school. Our house sat at the very end of Pine Street, where the pavement cracked into gravel and the streetlights stopped working years ago. It was an old Victorian that had been in my family for 3 generations, tall, narrow, and stubbornly clinging to life. The porch sagged just enough to make the front steps groan under your weight. Paint peeled in long curls from the siding, revealing weathered gray wood beneath. That afternoon, I turned the corner and saw them, Amanda and a few kids from our class, gathered across the street. She pointed at my house, and I heard her laugh. Looks like something from a ghost movie, she said. Do you guys even have heat in there? The others snickered. My cheeks burned, but I kept walking, clutching my backpack straps so tightly my knuckles whitened. Inside, the air was cool and faintly smelled of cedar and dust. My grandmother, Eleanor, was in the kitchen, humming as she stirred a pot of chicken soup. She looked up when I came in, her sharp blue eyes reading my face instantly. What happened, Claire? She asked. I shook my head, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. Nothing. Just kids being kids. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and reached into her apron pocket. From it, she pulled out a small brass key, worn smooth with age. This belonged to your great-grandfather, she said, pressing it into my palm. He used it to open the front door when this house was new. Back then, people called it the finest home in Maplewood. I turned the key over in my hand, feeling its weight. Things change, sweetheart. But remember this, a house is just walls and a roof. What matters is who you become inside it. And if you don't like what you see, you have the power to build something better. That night, I sat on my narrow bed under the patchwork quilt she'd sewn for me, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. Their laughter echoed in my head, and for the first time, I made myself a promise. One day, I would have a home so magnificent that no one would dare laugh at it. And I would make sure the people who mocked me would see it with their own eyes. 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I packed my life into a single duffel bag and a cardboard box of keepsakes. The brass key for my grandmother was tucked safely into my pocket. I moved to Columbus, Ohio, with barely $300 to my name and a waitress job waiting at a small diner. It wasn't glamorous. My shoes always smelled faintly of fryer grease, and my feet ached by the end of every shift, but it paid the bills. At night, I studied. I devoured every free online course I could find about real estate, architecture, and home restoration. Something about turning neglected places into something beautiful spoke to me on a deep level. Maybe it was because I knew what it felt like to be underestimated. My break came when I met Margaret Lane, a silver-haired real estate broker with a sharp business mind and an even sharper tongue. She came into the diner every Thursday morning for black coffee and a slice of cherry pie. One day, she overheard me talking to another waitress about flipping old houses. "You've got big ideas, kid," she said, sliding her business card across the counter. "Call me when you're ready to stop talking and start doing." Under Margaret's guidance, I learned everything: how to negotiate, spot hidden structural issues, and make every dollar count. My first property was a one-bedroom bungalow I bought at auction for $11,000. I spent 6 months restoring it myself, scraping paint, laying new floors, planting flowers out front. When I sold it for $38,000, I cried the entire drive home. The next project went faster. Then came another. Soon, I was buying and selling multiple properties a year. I specialized in historic homes, the kind most people saw as too much work. To me, they were sleeping beauties just waiting for someone to wake them. I kept my success quiet. On social media, I posted the occasional photo of a new coffee shop or a sunset. My family still assumed I was scraping by, and I didn't correct them. I wasn't ready for their curiosity or their judgment. 5 years in, my net worth had crossed the 7-figure mark. That's when I found her, my castle. Technically, it was a 19th-century stone estate just outside of Cincinnati, with turrets, gardens, and a library big enough to get lost in. The previous owner had let it fall into disrepair, and the asking price scared off every other buyer. But not me. I saw the vision instantly: polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, restored woodwork, a rose garden in full bloom. It took 2 years, a small army of craftsmen, and every ounce of my savings, but when it was done, it was breathtaking. The first night I slept there, I stood at the top of the grand staircase, the brass key from my grandmother in my hand. I whispered a quiet thank you to her memory. No one from my past had seen it yet. And that was exactly how I wanted it until Amanda's text lit up my phone. Amanda arrived on a crisp Saturday afternoon. I told her to stop by for tea, keeping my tone casual, as if she were visiting some cozy little cottage. What I didn't tell her was that she'd need to pass through wrought iron gates, drive a quarter-mile up a tree-lined path, and park in front of a castle with ivy climbing the stone walls. From the window of my study, I watched her car creep up the driveway, slowing every few seconds like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. When she finally parked, she stepped out slowly, her eyes darting from the turrets to the massive oak doors. I opened those doors myself. The hinges gave a deep, regal groan, not from disrepair, but from the sheer weight of them. "Claire," she said, her voice uncertain. "In the flesh," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. The grand foyer always had that effect on people, the way the marble floor reflected the sunlight streaming from the skylight above, the sweeping staircase with carved banisters, the chandelier glittering like 1,000 tiny stars. Amanda's jaw slackened. "This is yours?" "Every inch," I said, letting the words hang in the air. I led her into the drawing room, where a fire crackled in the stone fireplace. On the mantel sat the brass key in a glass case, beside a framed photo of my grandmother Eleanor. The walls were lined with oil paintings, but between them, I'd hung framed blueprints of my first properties, reminders of where it all began. She sank into the velvet armchair I gestured toward, still scanning the room like she was trying to spot the hidden camera. How did you?" she began. I poured tea into fine china cups, each movement slow and deliberate. "I bought my first house at 19. Flipped it. Bought another. Kept going. 10 years later, I had enough to buy this place and restore it to its original glory." Her eyes widened. "I thought you were barely making ends meet. I mean, you never posted about any of this." "That's because I wasn't doing it for the likes," I said with a small smile. "I was building something real." She shifted uncomfortably. "Wow. I guess I owe you an apology." I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "For what exactly? The times you called my old house a haunted shack? Or the way you made sure everyone at school laughed along?" Her cheeks flushed. "Claire, I was just a kid. I didn't mean—" "You did," I interrupted, my tone calm but firm. "And that's fine. because every laugh, every comment, every little dig, it fueled me. I told myself one day I'd have a home so magnificent no one could laugh at it. And here we are. Silence filled the room except for the crackle of the fire. "I'll give you the tour," I said, rising. I showed her the library with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and rolling ladder. The dining hall with a table that could seat 20. The rose garden, now in full bloom despite the autumn chill. By the time we returned to the foyer, she looked dazed. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "Just remember, it's never about where you start. It's about where you're going and whether you have the grit to get there." As she left, her gaze lingered on the castle one last time. I knew she'd remember this day for the rest of her life. And that was exactly the point. The Monday after Amanda's visit, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Apparently, she'd gone to lunch with a few of our old classmates and let slip, with a kind of faux casual tone that's anything but casual, that Claire lives in some kind of castle now. Within 48 hours, I had texts from people I hadn't heard from in over a decade. "We should catch up sometime. Hey, I might have a business idea you'd love. Would you consider investing in?" I ignored most of them. But when Amanda suggested bringing a few friends by for coffee, I said yes. They arrived on a Friday afternoon, pulling up in 2 SUVs. Along with Amanda came Todd, the boy who used to ride his bike past my old house and yell, "Boo!" and Marissa, who once asked me if we kept chickens inside for heat. When I opened the front doors, their reactions were identical. Wide eyes, open mouths, the little shuffle people do when they're not sure they belong somewhere. We gathered in the sunlit conservatory, the scent of roses drifting through the open windows. I let them gush. "This is incredible. I've never seen anything like it," before setting my teacup down with a quiet click. "So," I began, "I hear some of you have ideas. You're looking for its support." They exchanged glances. Todd cleared his throat. "Well, yeah. I mean, you've obviously done really well for yourself, and we were thinking." I held up a hand. "Before we talk about money, there are a few conditions." Their heads tilted in unison. "First," I said, my voice steady, "you stop judging people by what they have or don't have. You never know what they're building behind the scenes." A flicker of guilt crossed Marissa's face. "Second, whatever you start, you finish. No bailing when it gets hard, no blaming everyone else when it doesn't work right away." I built this from nothing because I kept going when it was inconvenient, exhausting, and sometimes humiliating. Todd shifted in his seat. "And third," I glanced toward the brass key on the mantel, "you do something good for someone who can't repay you. A stranger, a neighbor, doesn't matter. But you help them without expecting anything back." Amanda hesitated. "Those are reasonable. They're non-negotiable," I said, leaning forward slightly. "If you can't agree to all three, we don't even have a conversation." Silence stretched for a moment before Amanda spoke. "I'll do it." "Me too," Marissa added quietly. Todd nodded, though reluctantly. I smiled, but not with the sugary sweetness they might have expected. "Good. We'll meet next week, and you'll each bring proof you've started on those conditions. Then we'll talk business." The meeting ended there. As I walked them to the door, I could tell they understood something important. I wasn't just offering money. I was offering a chance to rise. And whether they took it seriously would determine everything. 2 months later, I met with them again. Amanda arrived first, carrying a box of fresh bread from a bakery she'd started volunteering at on weekends. She told me about the elderly woman who owned it, how she'd been struggling to keep the doors open until Amanda stepped in to help with marketing. Marissa came next, grinning as she showed me photos of a local park she'd organized a cleanup for. "I figured if I could help make the place look better," she said, "maybe the kids in the neighborhood would feel proud of it." Even Todd surprised me. He'd been coaching a youth baseball team for free, teaching kids from low-income families. "I didn't think it'd matter," he admitted, "but it turns out it does." I listened, nodded, and for the first time felt something shift. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was recognition. People could change if they chose to. That weekend, I drove back to Maplewood. The old Victorian stood where it always had, but now it gleamed with fresh white paint and a repaired porch. I'd bought it quietly months before, hiring local contractors to restore it. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted it to stand as a reminder that beauty and value aren't always obvious at first glance. I stepped inside, the air warm with the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. In my pocket, I still carried the brass key from my grandmother. I walked upstairs, into my old bedroom, and placed it on the windowsill where the light could catch it. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who walked past laughing classmates with her head down, fists clenched around backpack straps. She had no idea what was coming, only that she refused to let them define her. Now, standing between the home that built me and the castle I'd claimed, I felt complete. On the drive back, I imagined my grandmother's voice, warm and steady. "You have the power to build something better." And I had. As I pulled into the driveway of my castle, the setting sun casting gold across its stone walls, I smiled and whispered the final truth, the one I'd been waiting my whole life to say. They mocked my old house, but that was the foundation that built my castle.